Oh, evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the latest in our series of live events on Facebook, and I'm joined tonight by Lucy Siegle. Welcome, Lucy.
Hello. Hi.
How are you doing? It's been a long while, I think, since we last met.
Yeah, I haven't seen you for ages.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember when. Probably it was when I came to support Forest Green Rovers.
Yeah, maybe. I honestly can't remember either. It's been a very long time. How's things?
Yes, not bad. I mean, obviously super eerie times, but getting on with stuff, managed to do some work, keeping going. Quite good times for being a journalist because you can literally get hold of everyone you want to speak to, hence why you're talking to me now. So yeah, it's quite useful in many respects.
Yeah, nice one. Nice one. So, well, we can talk about anything on your mind, anything on mine. And I think we've got some questions queuing up. So anybody watching this, you can post a question on Facebook and our curator, will pick them up and he will lob them at us over the course of the next hour. Anything on your mind, Lizzie?
Well, there's a lot on my mind because I've just been reading your fabulous book, Manifesto.
Cool.
What a good read this is. And I was reading out bits to Ben, my husband, and he was going, oh, what happened then? What happened then? And you don't read many books on environmental issues where, people say stuff like, of course I was tripping. And just generally, like the stuff in the 1980s with the police was absolutely kind of fascinating. And I've been looking at the 1980s a lot recently. So I've been doing a podcast called So Hot right now with my friend Tom Mustill, who's a wildlife filmmaker, and he's much younger than me. So he was probably born in the 80s. I was born in 74. So we've been looking at communication and the way that the media has, am I allowed to swear?
Yes, definitely.
Fucked up coverage of climate and nature, and how, so George Monbiot, the Guardian writer, for example, would say that he holds the media the most culpable for all of the state that we're in. So I'd be interested to get your views on that, because I know at times you haven't been a massive fan and you've got some strong views on that. But we were also looking at the 1980s because we interviewed George for one of our podcast episodes, and he was talking about how he started out as an investigative journalist and the stories that he used to do. And he used to work for the BBC, so I think he was probably on staff as an investigative environmental reporter back in the day. And those kind of jobs don't really exist anymore, and part of that was because they prodded Thatcher and they poked her like a spoke in the wheels of the Thatcherite government several times in investigations, and she shut them down. So I've been reading a lot about the 1980s, the Criminal Justice Act and the police, which your book opens with these kind of extraordinary stories of your 10 years on the road and the Battle of Beanfield. And what really chilled me to the bone was, you said at one point, the Battle of Beanfield, you saw the state in full-on fascist mode. What was that like, and will you ever forget it?
No, I don't think I'll ever forget it. And it's the most incredible experience. The 80s, actually, just come back to the media point. The 80s was the first time that I think I really kind of had an awakening about what you read in the newspapers, because on the road at places like the Battle of the Beanfield, events would happen and we would read about stuff in the papers maybe the next day or something like that, and we'd think, well, there's no connection here between what happened, we were there, and what these guys are writing. That was a kind of wake up for me in terms of the role of the media in coloring public perception. And as part of what you said, you wondered what my view was on the role of the media, and I think it's been pivotal, fundamental in the madness of Brexit. 20 years of dripping poison in the ear of Britons about the EU that culminated in that disastrous vote at the referendum itself, propelled by lies, on the side of the bus, and lies propelled by the media as well. And, we've seen the BBC cowed over the years, since the 80s, no doubt. It happens every time there's a Conservative government. They don't like the BBC. The BBC holds them to account, and what they want is some kind of Fox media operation over here, like they have in the US. Just trumpeting right-wing propaganda. I'm sorry, but that's what I think. And if you look at who owns the media in this country, forget the BBC for a minute. I mean, that's publicly owned. Maybe that's why they don't like it. Look at the rest of the media, apart from the Guardian, maybe the Independent. It's owned by right-wing billionaires that live in tax jurisdictions, they're tax exiles, and they have this incredible impact on our country, on our politics, and on our lives. And I think it's something that's fundamentally wrong with our country. There's an awful lot of reliance falling back on the expression freedom of the press. It's about the free press and stuff like that. There's nothing free about it at all. It's it's owned by a bunch of billionaires with a right-wing agenda, and I don't think we should allow it. So there you go. You got me started.
Yeah, we went straight there. Great. I mean, I think from my point of view, I would just add that I am. I'm slightly uncomfortable with the term "the media" as one sort of homogenized block, because I think it's thrown at us a lot at the moment. And you saw the media being attacked by those who stormed Congress last week or whenever it was. Every day feels like a year at the moment. My timing's all over the place. So it's like there are very different parts of the media which have covered climate and nature, just to focus in on those crises in very specific ways. What I have found really, really difficult is that there was a virtual moratorium on climate debate, and it was about fixing this center. So it was politicized because we had all these climate deniers and all the rest of it, which thankfully, according to a lot of research, is almost kind of, they've died off, or we can start to ignore them. So it's really, we were supposed to find the center of the climate argument, which meant I found myself in like ridiculous situations, like being asked to debate climate change with Frederick Forsyth on live television. And I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And it was such a waste of time that I actually stopped talking about climate on TV, because I didn't want to be in that polarized thing. And it's not true to say that if one person's got this view about a settled science, that the other, you bring the extremist on and that finds the middle, because it's distorted, obviously. So we've got a lot of time to make up. I think we can all concede that things have got much, much better. Just before COVID actually hit, every major network seemed to be crewing with climate specialists, and it seemed like we were really going to increase coverage. So, I've just got to hope that we kind of get back to that position. And I think, Biden being elected, the Biden-Harris climate plan is going to propel the issue back into the media in the US. What do you think about that? How do you feel about what has happened in America?
Well, actually, I wanted to say that something really interesting, I think, happened in the last week. Trump got banned on social media, nearly all platforms. I think it was completed with YouTube in the last day or two. And it wasn't before time. He got banned for his incitement of the riot in at the Capitol. Social media, of course, has come along since conventional media, and it holds the promise of democratizing media. We can have this kind of chat. We can reach an audience, that's different. But there was some angst in the world about Trump's ban from social media. I think it was Merkel that said a couple of days ago that she thought it was problematic for the people that owned these tech platforms to be essentially deciding on what we can see and what we can hear, having editorial control over the media. And I thought, oh my God, because that's exactly what happens with the owners of conventional media. They've been doing it for decades. They control what we hear and what we see. They decide not just what stories that they do tell us about and what they don't, but how they tell us about them. And for some reason, Angela Merkel thinks that social media should be different. There shouldn't be any constraints, any editorial control at all, even to the extent of allowing liars and inciters of riots to just do what they like. And I thought that was really interesting, almost like a double standards, but it might mean that we get the chance to have this debate about the mainstream media, conventional media, and who controls it. This editorial power that they have, which is really considerable over our lives. But your question was, what do I think about what's happening with the media and the return of climate as an issue. Was it?
Yeah. What do you think will happen in the US? So did you take any interest in the Biden-Harris climate work? Did you think it's good? Do you think they've got a good plan?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think it's a really ambitious plan. It's very exciting. I think the US will take the leadership globally. I feel pretty sure about that. I think the EU may compete with them, especially absent Britain, because we were like a drag, on the progress that Europe could make, and now we're out. I think they can kick on. So I think there'll be a battle for leadership between the EU and the US, which is great. And these are exciting times. We just endured 4 or 5 years of bizarreness, really, and anti-climate, anti-everything that we believe to be right and proper, was trashed by the US. And he's president of the US, Trump, but to a degree he's president of the world, because what the US does has such an impact on the world. And so, it does matter to us what happens in America.
So that's a really interesting point that you raised. I do want to go back to the 80s and the police in a minute, by the way, because I love history and I love recent history. I wanted to just pick up on something you said. So you just talked about the EU sort of cutting us free. That slightly fills me with absolute horror. I mean, what do you think? Didn't Boris unveil a world-beating 10-point plan to net zero? Are you not convinced?
Yeah, we chuckled about that one. I think we called it the 10 pointless plan because, when you unpicked it, when you looked at it, there was nothing new in there. 80% of the money that was being pledged had already been repledged. So we quite like that from a recycling point of view, the recycling of pledges and money. But
it's circular.
Yeah, but it was just nonsense. It was Johnson ticking a box, and that's a bit unfortunate. But he's had to change his outlook for a number of different reasons, but not least because Trump will no longer be in the White House, within a few more days now. And so, Johnson has to change his outlook. We have left the EU. There are no excuses anymore for the things we can't do, like VAT on solar panels is 20% if you want to put them on your house. But if you want to power your house with coal, VAT is 5%. And up until now, the government have told us that they couldn't change that. It was an EU problem. It's not an EU problem anymore. So, these are the kind of things we can confront government with now and say, come on, let's turn the Brexit bonus that we're meant to be having into a green one, because we've got to make the transition to a green economy. We've got a great opportunity to do that now.
Let's solar power those sunlit uplands. Although does a sunlit upland need to be powered by solar?
Yes.
It's got its... Anyway, you understand what I'm saying. So, well, how would you do that then? How do you put pressure on government, and have you had any success with these incumbents?
I would say no, not really.
That's a non-starter for a question, wasn't it?
The last 10 months, I think they've been preoccupied with bungling the pandemic, haven't they? And I think they're still in the middle of all of that with the second or third peak. I don't know which one it is really. I think it's distracted them massively to the extent they even forgot about Brexit, actually, which is their whole raison d'etre.
So they didn't forget. They just, anyway.
Yeah, maybe. I was being kind. We've got COP26 coming up this year. We host it. That'll be really interesting. Obviously, the government talks about world beating this and world beating that. This is our chance to get to grips now. Chapter 13 of my book, I don't know what you thought of that, but there's a plan in there, a zero carbon plan, focuses on energy, transport, and food, talks about what government needs to do, people and businesses. And, I think there's an awful lot in there that could be picked up by government and they could run with, but who knows if they will.
Is there anyone on the senior team that you know or like the look of? Because I've been very angry about the senior team because there were no women on it until fairly recently. Now they've found one, so we're making some progress.
Yes,
but that matters to me because I think that really matters, not just from a gender equality perspective, but also because surely everything that we do now, and I know you were at COP 303 back in the day, and then COP 23.
Yes, I think it was. Yeah, in
Yeah.
Bonn. Yeah,
Yeah.
Poland.
So,
Poland. Yeah.
but you will have seen and noted the progress that now we talk about climate justice and everything has to be framed around climate justice. Surely that's the whole point. And it looks pretty weird if you take a sort of gentleman's public school club into your senior team as the host nation, I would say. And I do think it's important what we signal and what we message.
Yeah, I mean that's what our government is comprised of, and I think the cabinet itself is a very poor quality team of people. Actually, I'm not the only person that thinks that. I know, but you can see that in the the way they've handled the pandemic, the way the education secretaries handle schools and exams, and the way they've handled free school dinners. Just all manner of stuff. But yeah, there's been massive progress. I think it was COP4, my first one, Kyoto, and that was the one where the world first signed up to binding carbon targets. The target was ever so small. It might have been 1% or something. And I was super chuffed with that because I thought, doesn't matter how big it is, it's a really important first step because it's an acknowledgement of the problem and the fact the world needs to act together. And, fast forward to today, 20 odd years later, all of the talk is about 100%. It's about zero carbon economies and stuff like that. I mean, that's in 25 years, a quarter of a century. I think there is massive progress. We went as a country from 1 or 2% renewable energy to nearly 50% today, which is just, incredible. We can get to 100% in the next 10 years if we want to. That's within our grasp. And one of the themes of my book is green populism, actually. I don't know what you think about that, but it's the idea that we need to communicate in a different way.
So, what do you mean by that?
Well, for example,
sorry, Dale, it was COP3, by the way.
Oh, was it? Oh, well done.
94, page 94. Christoph got the passes. So I don't know, Christoph's wrong or you're wrong.
Or maybe, I thought it was 4, but hey, look, that's fine.
Maybe you went to 4 as well, but you very much had this sort of sense that this was a historic event, while people around you were a bit sort of, what was all that about? You seemed quite enthused by it, and you seemed to have this optimism, which I notice lots of that in this book, actually, at various different junctures. When everyone else is a bit down in the mouth, you're going, this is great. Something historic has happened here. Are you a natural optimist?
I am. I'm certain that I am. I must be. I have to be. Even now, I feel optimistic. Bad things happen, and I can see the opportunity for better things to come from them. Even Brexit, I think the EU without us is going to go on and do great things. We'll rejoin later. I know that we will.
Yeah, but what's going to happen to us in the interim? But never.
We'll pay the price. But hopefully the Conservatives will pay the price electorally. More than anything else, because they deserve to. They deserve to own the consequences of Brexit. I hope that all of that crystallizes, and that's what I take from where we are right now. Of course, the media will have a role in that, and there'll be some obfuscating around the role of the pandemic and whether the impacts of pandemic or Brexit and blah blah blah. But to come back to green populism.
Yeah, but then let me just put this to you on green populism front. You're looking at leaders. Some people call him a democidal haystack. Some people may say he's the greatest popular communicator that we've ever had, and that's why he was elected, because he's a populist. And yet here you are saying, actually, there's something in what these guys do.
Yes. And
Explain yourself.
I absolutely will. But let me just say, he's not that popular anymore. An opinion poll last week said most Britons want him to resign. So I think we've kind of seen through. He's more like the Wizard of Oz, I would say. We've peeked behind the curtain and found him very wanting. What I mean about green populism is this, that I think the way that populists communicate has an appeal. They cut through with simple messaging. Often they do it with lies, which I don't advocate. But I think that on the left and in the environment, we tend to communicate in dry, complicated ways. It doesn't engage with people. We need to engage with people. So I want to give you an example, because the best example I have is this. We talk about the need to get to 100% renewable energy in our country to fight the climate crisis and all that kind of good stuff. It's an altruistic thing to do. It looks like it's going to cost money and take a lot of effort and stuff like that. There's a different way we can present that. So right now, we spend £50 billion a year buying fossil fuels, bringing them to our country and burning them. We buy them from global oil and gas markets that are openly rigged by cartels. We buy them in dollars, so we're subject to the fluctuation of the exchange, and the price of oil and gas has been 3 times higher than it is today. So that could be 150 billion. So at the moment, it's £1 billion per week, 3 times the size of the lie on the Brexit bus, and we just burn it. If instead we spend that making our own forms of renewable energy from the wind and the sun, we'll create hundreds of thousands of jobs. We'll remove ourselves from this global market where we're price takers, not price makers, and we can create energy independence. So it's about language, it's about how we present issues, and the opportunity that I would present is for us to be energy independent, not for us to fight climate change. Let that be a consequence that comes from it. But in Britain, we have enough renewable energy to power our country 10 or 20 times over. We don't need to spend all of this money in fossil fuel markets, so that we can burn this stuff, pollute the air, and drive the climate crisis. That's my best example.
Okay, it's pretty good. Are you calculating? Are you putting Scotland into that calculation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the UK. Yeah.
So, what would happen if you couldn't put Scotland into that calculation?
Well, I think the fossil fuel bill would go down by a small amount because the population of Scotland is relatively small compared to the population of England, and the availability of wind energy, it would go down to a degree because Scotland has got some very windy places. But there's an enormous resource in England for solar and onshore wind. We've still got offshore. We've got tidal lagoons that are possible. This week we announced geothermal. We've teamed up with some guys in Cornwall to buy some energy from Britain's first geothermal project. So that's electricity from under our feet, for example. I get what you're driving at. What if Scotland leaves the Union? It could happen. But it doesn't massively affect this outlook that actually, if we reframe the discussion as one of energy independence, freeing ourselves from foreign markets over which we have no control, making our own energy here, creating jobs here as a massive part of the green economy, that's a different thing to sell than, we need to fight climate change, let's spend all of our money on windmills. This 50 billion a year is an incredible sum of money. It's an incredible waste.
So do you feel that climate messaging is putting people off?
Which kind? The climate kind?
Yeah. So if you're saying, let's talk about, jobs and energy and the kind of positive, do you think that the unnecessary, as you see it, complication of raising the climate problem first, is that distracting people, putting them off? What's the problem there?
Yeah, that's what I think. I think it can be dry, it can be technical, it can be altruistic. It can look like we're asking for something from people for which they don't get much back in return because the climate is a big concept. It doesn't look like it immediately impacts on people. So it's a reframing of that, and to say, look, we all have energy bills. We spend a shed load of money as a country every week, £1 billion every week on this stuff. If we make it here, we can keep that £1 billion in our economy, creating jobs here. I mean, that's about appealing to people's personal interest. And, so the lessons I take from that are really from around Brexit, the idea of being rule takers, not rule makers, and being kind of dictated to by, in this case, the EU and that kind of stuff. Our energy is not in our control. At the moment, the oil and gas that we're buying from global markets is not. And I just want to say this as well. It's one of the great things about renewable energy. Geographically, every country in the world has it. So the plan in chapter 13 of my book can apply to any country in the world. Right now, oil and gas is concentrated in particular regions of the world, as we know. And we fight wars over it. There's all kinds of geopolitical hassle about that because it only occurs in certain parts of the world. So renewable energy can democratize all of this and have a massive geopolitical impact on the way the world works, because we can forget oil and all of the hassle that comes with it, and all of us can make the energy that we need in our own countries.
Oil as well, stored in tankers, which sometimes leak and kill all the wildlife. I'm just out the corner of my eye, I'm seeing loads of questions. You're really popular, Dale. A lot of questions about Tidal. because you've been talking about other sorts of renewable, are you interested in tidal, and do you see a place for tidal energy?
Yeah, I do. I see a role for tidal lagoons, but not the type that was proposed for Swansea, which was attached to the shore, but for the offshore version, which is the original model, in fact. There's a chance there to make energy pretty close to the wholesale market price for energy, much cheaper than the onshore tidal lagoon version. And I think, we could aspire to maybe 10% of the energy that we need coming from offshore tidal lagoons, but it comes at really set times of the day as well. So it's not quite base load, but it is controllable form of renewable energy, which brings added value that wind and solar don't have.
What does base load mean? Sorry, can you just do a quick idiot's guide for me?
Yeah, if you were looking at a graph with an X and Y axes, base load is just a straight line along the graph. It just means constant output. And usually it's applied to fossil fuel power stations that you can turn on and turn off. Nuclear runs baseload as well, but it has a different problem. You can't turn it up or down in a hurry. It has to run. Renewable energy is driven by the weather. Fossil fuels can be turned on and off fairly quickly, and nuclear has to run.
How much do we need to power down?
Well, I think we do need to waste less energy, and there are lots of ways we can do that. And it's, the key message from our book is that energy, transport, and food, between them, are 80% of all of our carbon footprints and our problems. How we power ourselves, how we travel, and within all of those three, we need to waste less energy. We need to have less wasteful travel, and obviously waste less food as well, and then source what we do need from renewable sources. We can probably knock 10 or 20% off of our national energy bill with intelligent use of energy. Turning stuff off when we go out of a room is an obvious thing, but with energy efficient appliances, for example, as well. But the really exciting opportunity coming is the smart grid. That's how we're going to get to be 100% renewable energy powered in the future, how we're going to balance demand and generation. And at the moment, we have what I would like to think of as kind of dumb demand. We all just flick a switch when we want power, and often it's at the same time. In the winter evening peaks, we all do that, and demand goes through the roof. And then at other times, it falls off a cliff. The smart grid will control that kind of stuff, so that we get a flatter curve of consumption. We can improve the efficiency of the grid and all that kind of stuff. So when people say, but how can we power ourselves 100% with the renewable energy? What if the wind stops blowing, which is a classic? The answer is we'll have a modern grid, a smart grid, where we schedule demand as well as we schedule generation.
Who's going to pay for that grid?
Well, I don't think it's going to be very expensive, actually. Most of this is just about being intelligent. We've got AI, we've got networks, we've got the internet. There's a massive opportunity to install devices at people's homes, battery devices that can take houses on and off the grid at the right time of the day. On the commercial level, there are a lot of commercial loads that can just be turned off. They're not needed for half an hour or an hour, and that can make a massive difference. So that's just about some controls. It's not a big cost like building a new power station or something like that. It's just about being smarter with the way that we use energy.
How would you characterize the energy system at the moment and the major players in it? Because there's some real there's some real rum-dos in the book, some real clashes, and it's really super interesting, because sometimes green businesses or environmental business is sort of portrayed as being a little bit sort of wet and a bit sort of not the kind of muscularity of the cut and thrust. I mean, my God, there's some tales in here that would make your hair curl. Really? Yeah. Have things improved, got worse, or what's the situation?
I think business has got plenty of people in it that just behave badly, and they use business as an excuse to do that. You hear people say, "Oh, it's not personal," or "It's just business," or something like that. And I think,
but they're actually psychopaths.
Yeah, maybe they are, but for them, business is an excuse to be immoral or amoral. But the energy system itself, I would describe as being in transition. To this new future, this 100% place, to the smart grid. We've got smart meters, I think, that are halfway installed in our country now. Something really interesting happened in the last few days, and it's not as a consequence of Brexit, but there's been a few different factors that have combined for us to have had system prices that are the highest they've been for 20 years, something like £8,000 a megawatt hour in certain half an hours of the day. And the combination of factors are that the French nuclear contribution to our power needs dropped off, nothing to do with Brexit, I'm sure. There was also a problem with a Nordic interconnector. Again, I'm sure it's got nothing to do with Brexit. We had unseasonably cold weather, and there was low wind, and there was high demand. And this like perfect storm of things drove system prices, as I say, to a 20-year high. And this is kind of this is what we're wrestling with, really, you know, and this is what we've got to fix so that this kind of stuff doesn't happen.
Okay, there's tons and tons of questions, and I'm just a little bit worried that we won't get through as many as we should. So here's Will.
Will.
Hello. I feel like the worst person popping into a dinner party and just saying, hey, have you got any food left for me? Loads and loads of fantastic questions. Lots of people suggesting you should both run for Parliament, which is quite interesting. One of my favourites so far is Pete on Facebook said, Democidal Haystack. I want that on a T-shirt. So
I
there you
made
go,
it up
Lucy.
this morning.
That could be that could be something that you're working on. Another one for you, Lucy. Gemma has said she's a huge fan of So Hot right now. When are you back with another series?
Oh, thank you. When we get a sponsor, so you know, Dale, Will, maybe you can help with that. But we're very keen. We're raring to go, and we've got some really good guests lined up, actually. So yeah, and thank you for listening.
And got one here for you, Dale. This is from the best name I've ever seen, Bruce Asbestos. Bruce, I hope that's your real name. What's reaction been like to the diamonds? Does this get the conversation about climate change into new places?
Yeah, I'd say the reaction has been fantastic, and yes, it does actually. I think it changes the outlook, and the way I see it is part of this story that we're trying to tell. You know, the need to look at things differently. You know, we like to say whether it's burgers, football, or cars, you know, we don't have to give stuff up to be green. It's not about giving up living. It's about doing it differently. And now we can even include diamonds in that. You know, we can have bling without the sting, without the environment cost of that. So it's also a great example of technology. I love that. We put back cleaner air into the atmosphere than we take out, which I think is an industrial first. And our entire ingredient list is the wind, the sun, and the rain, and atmospheric carbon, of course. And that's it. That's all we use. So I love that. And I think it's evocative. It gets people thinking, and it excites people. And I think it shows what we can do with technology pointed in the right direction.
I love that film. I like the way she went at some point after quite a complex description. She went, "Oh, and this is a magic box. Something happens in there."
That's because we wouldn't let her look in the magic box.
Well, that one, yeah.
Here's one for you, Lucy, from Dave Walker Nix, and he has emailed zerocarbonista@ecotricity.co.uk. Lucy, humans have a terrible habit of avoiding the truth and sticking their heads in the sand. How do we entice them out of the sand when great environmental solutions come up?
Yeah, I mean, we are somewhat delusional, which is helpful sometimes when we get ourselves into really bad problems, because it keeps hope alive. I'm not sure that everyone is going to confront the truth. So I do honestly think that it's about selling them in different ways and communicating. And I think that's what Dale speaks to really powerfully. And I think the problem for me a lot of the time has just been lack of conversation. So we just haven't had enough different options to entice different people. I'm just thinking, for some reason, I can't get that awful like hot chocolate advert out of my head. Cadbury's options. But it is like, some people like this one, some people like this one. And it's like, if you only have one sort of person presenting environmental news, which tends to be a posh white man with a very earnest voice, then a lot of people that doesn't appeal to. Similarly, if it's just me, you know, believe it or not, I don't appeal to everyone. Can you imagine? So we haven't had enough diversity, and we know from ecosystems, we understand biodiversity is key. And I think that's really, really important in coverage and selling ideas. One more thing, we established that Dale was an optimist. I'm not a natural optimist, but after I interviewed Christiana Figueres, the brilliant climate negotiator who brought together the Paris Treaty, she basically put me through optimism boot camp for So Hot right now. And it works. It's just a muscle that you need to train and flex.
I'm going to be an optimist in 2021. Two more from me, and then I'm going to hand back to you guys because you've got great conversation going already. Dale, does the collapse of Bristol Energy and the fact it lost Bristol City Council 50 million quid, does it mean there's no future for cheap or local community energy projects?
Well, I didn't realize it was 50 million. Last time I saw it was like 36, which was bad enough. I don't think it means there's no future for community energy schemes. I think the premise of Bristol Energy was flawed. I think there's no future for that. And we've seen the same with, I think, Robin Hood Energy in Nottingham as well. And there's been a couple of others, But then, they're not the only people to have entered the energy market in the last, let's say, 5 years. Maybe 70 companies have entered the market. With the same basic kind of model to sell energy for less than they can buy it for in order to grow a market share and to become a bigger company. It's a thoroughly unsustainable model, and that's what Bristol City found out. Unfortunately, we did warn them.
One more from me, and then I'm going to disappear. And I know Lucy's interested in this one. This is from the Plug Seeker YouTube channel. Dale, looking forward to your new high-powered chargers on the motorway network. What can you tell us, and when will we see them? And I'm going now for a bit. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, bye. I had an update in my email just before the show, actually. I haven't read it, but I know that we've done the groundwork. I know we were held up by a couple of pandemic-related events. The grid is in. I think the chargers are on the way. It can only be a month or two, I think, before they're installed. 6 chargers capable of 350 kilowatts, CCS with a bit of CHAdeMO as well, because that's a kind of dying standard. It's not dead yet, and we will support it. But CCS is like the VHS. For anybody old enough to remember VHS and Betamax, then CCS is the winner of the technological battle. So Rugby's a really exciting project. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think it's a couple of months away.
Well, I do have a bit of an interest in this at the moment because I have been loaned an electric car. It's the first time I've had an EV for over a few weeks, and I love the way I get it when there's a lockdown, so I can't really go anywhere, which is lucky because charges can be quite difficult, can't they? So I've made loads of friends on the helpline. I have really there's such a community of people. We have a sort of fast charging point near us. There's been BT open-reach vans parked in front of it. There's been people not leaving enough space, and there's such a sort of camaraderie amongst EV drivers, like trying to sort these problems out all the time. I got when I said I was doing this, somebody tweeted at me a rather unkind question to you. They said, get Dale to answer why his monopoly of EV chargers don't work. And I thought, well, that's not fair, because it's not just yours. None of them bloody work. What is going on?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of problems in the EV charging space. I think it's worth probably reflecting on the fact that the industry itself is 10 years old. So we began building the electric highway in 2011. And at that point in time, we had the Nemesis on the road. That was first electric car made in Britain. And Nissan were just introducing the Leaf, and it had a range of about 80 miles. And we put 3 kilowatt chargers on the motorway, basically 3-pin plugs. That was the best tech available in the day. And this is now 10 years later. Within a couple of years of beginning, 50 kilowatts came along, which was a revolution, really, compared to where we were. And if you fast forward to now, cars hitting the road have a typical range of 200 or 300 miles. And the latest models can charge at a rate of 150 kilowatts, which is just incredible. And 350 capable cars are coming in the next couple of years. And so there's been a transformation of the technology for charging and cars themselves. But I don't think that the network technology, certainly our technology is old. There's no doubt about it. Most of our 50 kilowatt chargers are pushing 7, 8 years old, and they've been left behind. So contactless didn't exist in the day, for example. Everybody wants contactless. We get that. And all of the new stuff that we're putting in is contactless. It's just going to take time to change the fleet. And then you've got a lot of different standards. You've got people that are charging a membership monthly, for example. You've got different apps and different ways of access. There must be 4 or 5 different networks in the country now, and so I think part of the problem is the lack of standardization and the lack of contactless access, which is easy for everybody. We all get that. And at the same time, in our case in particular, because we're the oldest, we're the first network, we've got a big job on to renew our pumps. That's a fact.
Well, maybe if you could do them, we could all come out of lockdown and it's all done.
Yeah,
and that would be really exciting.
Yeah, the lockdown hasn't helped, that's for sure. But it's very much on our agenda. We're having to have some news on that in another, maybe a couple of weeks. Unveil some new plans. But it is what it is. And I think 10% of car sales last year in Britain were electric, which is really quite incredible achievement. The sales of petrol and diesel cars did fall off a cliff last year, which will have helped. But in Norway, sales of electric cars last year were 50% of the market. So, EVs.
There's no going back.
Nah, not at all.
I mean, now I've been trying this Jaguar I-Pace, which is the fanciest car I've ever been in, with onto, and there's no way I can go back to a disgusting car belching out fumes. No. And do you think so? We've had a bit more of an examination of air quality, and I'm thinking in particular the lady whose daughter Ella died, so Deborah Kissy, I can't remember her surname, but that has been such an emotive, and she's so brave, the way she's taken that to the High Court and the way that she deals with the media, actually, I mean, is just so dignified, and so she's done so much for the air quality debate. Do you think that our opinions as citizens are starting to shift and prioritize clean air and health for our children?
Yeah, I do. And I think the pandemic has helped in that respect, because it did shut traffic down, particularly in the first lockdown, a little bit less so up until maybe today or yesterday. I noticed the roads were quiet, but other than that, the second lockdown wasn't as big on the roads. But first lockdown, I think the air got a lot cleaner. I mean, definitely in cities, the air got a lot cleaner. I mean, I'm a kind of country person, and I go to London if I really have to. And it always shocked me when I went to London just how dirty the air was. I'd come back out and I'd have black bogies in my nose. It sounds a little bit grim, and I think,
they're prized.
These people breathe this air every day. How can it make sense? But it never made sense to me that we thought we could just burn fossil fuels and pump it out the back end of a car and it disappeared, because it doesn't disappear. And our government tells us that 40,000 people a year die prematurely because of air pollution driven mostly by cars. They tell us that. This is the government that's telling us that. And yet, this is the first time in the case of Ella that a coroner has recorded air pollution as a cause of death. First time ever. I think it's a really important decision, a very brave and important battle that's been fought. But what I worry about, to a degree, is that our air quality has been illegal under EU regulations for ever. Now that we've left the EU, I think it's suddenly going to become not so illegal, but it's not going to get any better. We're just going to change the regulations, which I think is unfortunate. But the optimist in me says, look, the pandemic has taught us all the value of clean air and how it can be done differently. We're seeing pedestrian zones and car-free zones pop up everywhere. I think they're so important. We really do need to reclaim the streets from the tyranny of the motor car, actually.
Well, they've certainly reclaimed some of the streets in quite dramatic fashion in some places, which has caused, it's caused a bit of an uproar. Thank you, Patrick. Rosamond Kissy Deborah is the name of Ella's mum, who's a brilliant activist. I'm just I'm kind of wondering, I want to just talk about the book a little bit as well, again. Why did you decide to write it now?
Oh, well, I didn't. I decided about this time last year, probably. And it was because Penguin got in touch and said, we'd like to publish, a book from you. And over the last maybe 5, maybe even 10 years, probably as long as 10 years ago, no, in fact, 20 years ago was the first time somebody said to me, you should write a book. And I was like, oh, it's just too early. I've got nothing to say. Nothing's happened yet. And I kind of carried that with me for a long time, up until this time last year when Penguin knocked on the door, and I thought, maybe now is a good time. And then the pandemic happened and lockdown happened in February, and I hadn't really given it a lot of thought. And the deadline for the book was like early June. I kind of woke up to that fact 2 weeks ahead of time. I had some help from John Robb, who was doing some ghostwriting for me, and I thought that would solve the problem, but it didn't. And I kind of woke up to the fact that 2 weeks ahead of deadline, I had a book to write, and I did it in a month, so I was 2 weeks late. But I was helped by lockdown because I spent 10 hours a day sat here actually working on my computer or walking on the common, thinking about what I was going to write next, and just spat it out in a month, and really enjoyed it. I love to get the stories out because I'd kept them with me all this time.
They're amazing stories. And so there was one of them, I can't remember what it was now, but you haven't really spoken about it before. I think it was about the police and the Battle of Beanfield. And, let's make no bones about it. I mean, there was 537 people were arrested. It was extremely brutal. I've started with that quote that you said about, you saw the state acting in as a fascist power, essentially. And you refer to the people that were there as survivors afterwards. Was it kind of painful to bring up those memories and talk about them?
I think it was a really traumatizing event. And I think for years I hadn't realized just how much. About a year after that, I was living in Spain, and a lot of people did the same kind of thing, just kind of left the country to avoid more conflict. And I think it was maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, a TV company approached me to say they were doing something around the anniversary of the Battle of the Beanfield, and I went down to the site, took my old motorbike that I'd ridden on the day, and they brought a copper there who was also there, and I was expecting maybe there'd be a bit of kind of difference of opinions and stuff, but this guy had resigned from the force the day after the Battle of the Beanfield because he was ashamed of what had happened. And I found it really emotional to talk to him and to relive those memories. But I think before that, maybe 5-10 years after the event, I only began to realize just how traumatic it was and the impact that it had on me. It was just incredible.
Do you think that you would be doing what you do now if it weren't for that? Was it like a seminal moment?
No, not in that respect, because I've always been wired this way, just to do the things that I want to do, that I think should be done or need to be done, and nothing stops me from doing that. That's just the way I am. So no, it's just part of my colourful backstory.
It is a very, very good backstory, and it's very well told. So when you say John Robb, is that the John Robb?
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, with the Mohican.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. He's a great writer. Did he not help you?
He helped me shape the book, absolutely. But Will tell you, when it comes to words that come from me, I'm ever so fussy about that. And I just had to write it myself. I spent a few hours with John talking about the stuff I'd done and my life story, as it were. And it absolutely helped me to kind of assemble it. And John had some real insight as well into the counterculture of the 80s, which was really helpful as well. So I think his biggest impact was probably in that chapter, the Battle of the Beanfield chapter, and that period. But no, I had to write it. And I'm really glad that I did, because it led all the way up to green populism, which I think is a term that John coined for the first time in our conversations. And then it led up to chapter 13, the manifesto, which is the culmination of all of the work and experience that I've had in sustainability. And it was the plan that I'd wanted to put down on paper for so very long. And in the process of doing that, I saw where the gaps were, and it caused me to go away and fill those gaps in, in the same way that when you try to explain to somebody how something works, you realize if you really understand it or not. So the first time I tried to write it down, I could see that actually, although it sounded right when I spoke it had gaps when it was written on paper. So
it's very well done, and there's so much information in there which is very clearly explained, even on stuff like wind data. Ladies and gentlemen, Will has popped up, and we've got so many questions. I don't know what we're going to do. We can't hear you, Will.
Probably helps if I turn my microphone on, doesn't it? When the technical guy fails. I'm like that awful person at a dinner party that always tries to get in on the conversation.
Yeah.
We've totally ruining it. But what we've got, loads and loads of lovely messages from people. We've had a hello from Galway City on the windy west coast of Ireland. We've got people watching in California. We've got people watching in Australia. Hello, everybody. So that's pretty cool from that perspective. Lots of questions have come in. One for you, Dale. Jeremy says, great to see you're venturing into Cornwall with your geothermal plans. What are your thoughts on the lithium studies taking place on the seabed in my county?
I haven't seen the seabed aspect of that, but what I have seen, and I don't think it came out of the story yet, is that there's lithium in that hot water that's underground. And so the guys that are plumbing the geothermal for energy are also expecting to be able to produce lithium for electric cars and batteries generally, which I think is really exciting. The idea that we can actually make lithium here in Britain. I mean, who knew? My
family got very excited because my family is half Cornish, way back, tin miners. My great-grandmother, who was still alive until I was sort of early teens, she used to talk about metals in a way that is just like weird. Like she used to really value pewter. She was always talking about, oh, it's made of pewter. So anytime we hear Camborne School of Mining on the radio, we get really, really excited. So yeah, good luck with that in Cornwall.
One here for you, Lucy. It says you've focused on plastics and fast fashion. What's next?
Well, I'm doing a lot around circular economy, but the real circular economy, not the fake one that pretends that stuff like plastic is circular, for which there's very little evidence. So that's still really in plastics and fashion. And I think the problem for me is that, like, I just find fashion and plastics so expansive and so interesting that I'm having trouble moving. I'm like the opposite of Dale. Like, I get stuck. And I don't know how to I think there's something in your book where you describe it really well. Like you never want to get like too focused on something, because then you realize you would be missing out on something else. And I'm the opposite. Like, do not give me a subject, because 30 years later I will still be looking at like minutiae that no one cares about. Help me.
Tim on Facebook as well, Lucy says, I know a bit about Dale, but this is the first time I've come across your work. Where can I read more, or what can I find out about what you've been working on?
I'm on Twitter, Lucy Siegle,
Siegle. Yeah, it's at the bottom of the screen now.
Oh yeah, there it is. I've done lots of writing. I'm not writing anywhere at the moment particularly, so it's a little bit of a difficult one. I've got a Dispatches coming out in March on Channel 4. Which is on an environmental theme, and I am often on the One Show on BBC One. It depends how old you are, because it tends to be an older audience. But how can I put that politely?
Can I ask you a question, Lucy?
Yeah.
A fashion question.
Yeah.
Have you come across digital fashion, the idea of clothes that are virtual?
I've seen it in terms of trying things on and fashion weeks. Mm-hmm. How would that work in the real world?
It appears to be working. Some people got in touch with me last week. They're based near where we are here, actually, and they built a website. They design clothes, and people are buying them, and then they're having them kind of fitted to a photograph of themselves, and they're buying digital clothes, and they're using them on Instagram and stuff like that. And
wow, that's amazing!
And it's avoiding all of the waste of making clothes.
That's so cool.
Having some of the fun. Yeah, I thought you might like that.
God, I love it. And then you could be sort of like a little bit disingenuous with the sizing and stuff like that. That's great. Yeah. I absolutely love it. Becoming avatars, really. I suppose James Lovelock's new book, I mean, I haven't read it, but I read a review of it, and it sounds quite bonkers, but he thinks that essentially what humans will become is like pot plants for cyborgs. So we'll be sort of nice to have around. And Yeah, I mean, why not give them a helping hand and wear digital fashion? Let's dematerialize ourselves out of existence.
It's 25 minutes past 8 now. We agreed to run for an hour, but we're going to run for another 10 minutes if that's all right with Lucy and her dinner plans.
Yes.
So if you've got questions, get them in now because we are running short of time. Here is one for you, Dale. Have you changed your EcoTalk network? Is it working with RSPB now? What can you tell me about it? And that's from somebody called Rachel, who's on Twitter.
Yeah, it's a new partnership with the RSPB. We had a partnership anyway, but I think really we just kind of made it more prominent in the branding. It's EcoTalk plus RSPB, and you know, the money that we make from people's mobile phone bills is going to be used in RSPB type rewilding projects. So it's kind of like an evolution of EcoTalk, really. I think we've got like 4,000 customers, maybe something like that. And the central premise of it is just like Ecotricity, where we have bills into mills. We use people's energy bill money to build windmills and sun mills and stuff like that. With EcoTalk, we're taking the proceeds from people's mobile phone bills and using it to create wildlife habitats. You know, bills into hills, we like to say sometimes, because hills are quite good habitats to, you know, a land to buy back from farmers and give back to nature. So that's what's happening with it.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
Any collaboration with Bobby Llewellyn in the pipeline?
Well, we had
great.
He is. We had a chat, I think, a week or two ago, actually. Had been a while. You know, his fully charged thing seems to be going pretty well. But I don't think we've got any collaborations in the pipe. But yeah, I'm a big fan of his work.
We should get them in. I should also say, if you are interested in fashion or you haven't really thought about much of it before, I was involved in a documentary called The True Cost, which was on Netflix. I think it's now on Amazon. And it's a really good primer into the true cost of fashion. And the point is, as sort of Dale alluded to, is that fashion's footprint is absolutely extraordinary. It's a full spectrum industry, so it runs from, you know, the cotton fields or the cracking of oil right through to the catwalk and everything in between. There's like 101 different points to making a garment, technically, and there's 101 different ways to bring chaos to people and planet, because let me tell you, fast fashion is scary. Like, it's has been one of the scariest industries for me. So, you know, a lot of my work has been about campaigning to break that system, and because I feel like we need to abolish it completely. It's actually starting to abolish itself for various reasons. Philip Green, Topshop being a prime example, but it's just not sustainable, and it's not consistent with what we need to do for ecosystems, to save ecosystems, or to save ourselves on ecosystems.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Will, you've muted again.
Oh, I'm failing terribly here.
He's doing it for extra attention.
Definitely not. Final one for me. Andy Lyon on Facebook says, Dale, would be really interested to hear more about the political intentions you mentioned in the video at the start of this.
Yeah, I think what it was really a kind of coming together of the threads of the story for me. In chapter 13, I set out how I think that the three big sectors of our society need to work together: people, business, and the government. And I've lived this life as a person, and I've lived it through business, trying to bring this kind of change. What I haven't tried to do is to work within politics to bring that kind of change. And so it just seemed logical to me, because in the 20 years I've been doing this, the technology has come along. It's become more economic to do this than to not do this. And we've seen the behavior change that we need to be, you know, really quite readily accessible to people. We've got all of the ingredients. We know we have to do it. We know we can do it. We have the technology, and it's cheaper and better for us to do it that way. But what we're lacking most, in my opinion, is a government or politicians that get it. You know, with, as you mentioned, Lucy, Boris Johnson's 10-point list plan. It's just a box ticking exercise. You know, we haven't yet got a government that's really grasped it. And governments, they set out the way that the world works. Markets are created by governments with taxes, subsidies, and regulations. They tell us what we can do, what we can't do, and what we must do. And they can simply change that. At the moment, much more money goes into fossil fuels and renewable energy, into conventional cars than electric cars, into animal farming, intensive animal farming, than it does into plants. And the taxes are skewed, 20% VAT on solar panels, 5% on coal, no VAT on meat, but actual VAT on nuts, that kind of stuff. And so it'd be very easy for the government to just change the rules of the game and to skew the market. First, level it up, and then start to tip it towards the good stuff so that it doesn't pay to do the old things and the bad things. It'd be very straightforward. So yeah, it just led me to the conclusion that maybe where I could have the most impact next might be in politics. I don't know how, I don't know when, but that was my conclusion.
But there's now speculation here. Lots of people are very into you joining politics, and they want you there, but they want to know which party you're going to join. If someone says don't join the Green Party because they don't have a chance, and because we don't have proportional representation, so the democratic system is in trouble, isn't it? So how are you going to get involved in reforming that system somehow?
I don't think we've got time to fix the system and fix the planet. We've got 10 years. So I would join the Labour Party. Absolutely. I think they get the need for a green economy. They've embraced the green industrial revolution and also the social justice. I mean, it's a natural part of Labour, and it's what can come out of this green economy that we need to build, more justice in our country and in our world. So for me, that would be the natural place to go. And I've got a lot of friends in the Green Party. We work with the Green Party. I've got a lot of time for them, absolutely. But you have to be realistic. It could take 100 years to have a green government at the rate of current progress. And I don't think we're going to get proportional representation anytime soon. But if we are going to get it, we'll get it through a Labour government. That's clear. We'll never get it through a Conservative government. So it's just about being realistic. Ahead of the last election, I sat down with the candidate for Stroud, the Green candidate for Stroud. And I remember very clearly, she said to me, she complained. The first thing she did was complain. She said, Labour have stolen all of our policies. And I said, you should be very pleased, because the best chance of seeing those policies in action is in the hands of the Labour Party, because only one of two parties can become government in our country. That's the reality. And so, I think the Green Party itself should aspire to make itself redundant. Its role should be as a catalyst to bring these green policies forward, make them public, make them attractive, get them adopted by one or both of the mainstream parties, and then bow out because they're no longer needed. That's just my thought.
Well, we revolutionise the democratic system, which has become moribund, and we give children the vote. 6-year-olds, they need to vote. That's the way to do it. I'm not even joking. If you lose me, it's because, ironically, I'm running out of juice because I forgot to plug my computer in. A lot of people saying you've got loads of time to get into politics because Biden is 78.
Yeah, but we've got 10 years to save the world.
Yeah, you haven't got that long. You can't wait that long. So we're not going to get into Corbyn, sorry, because I've got low battery and I just can't do it. Biden stole Bernie's 2016 climate policy. Fair. I mean, that does happen. Dale's advocating stealing all of the Green Party's policies. So this is all fair in love and war and politics. What do you want people to take away from the book? What single thing?
I think it's the concept, the idea, the message that actually we have much more power in this than we think we have, because 80% of our carbon footprints, our personal carbon footprints, are in these three areas of life: how we power ourselves, how we travel, and what we eat. We make spending decisions every day in these three areas. And so we are more responsible than we think we are in terms of which way the world goes around, because that's what money does. It decides which way the world goes around. So every day, we can make conscious decisions and choices to turn the world a different way by making different choices. And when we do that, we send signals to business and to governments, because these people don't tend to lead, they tend to follow. They spend a lot of time doing market research and opinion polling and that kind of stuff to find out what it is that people want. And one of the key ways to show them what you want is to show them what you spend your money on. And then we can see that in big food, for example. The rise of veganism, plant-based food in the last 2-3 years has just been incredible. It's everywhere now, in every supermarket, every fast food outlet. Veganuary has just had its biggest month. We're in the middle of it right now. And so that's my message, that we have much more power than we think. We don't need to wait for business and government to make this change. We can start right now.
The other bit of your book, which I really loved, was the sort of the bitching, and you dish the dirt on environmentalists who carry on eating meat. And you were very, very cross about that, quite rightly. And, what's the problem? Just stop doing it. I mean, it's easy.
I don't know. I was really shocked. I was shocked by Greenpeace in Buenos Aires when we went out after that might have been COP4, because it was the one after Kyoto. And they all had big fat steaks, and I couldn't believe that. And I was shocked more recently at WOMAD on the stage with one of the founders of XR, super radical group. And I think they've done great things. And then she turned around and said, no, we don't have to give up eating meat. We can eat kind of organic, hand-reared, cuddled, cows or something. I don't really know. But, such a bizarre thing. I was totally taken aback. And for me, it's the elephant in the room. It's the cow in the room. A lot of well-meaning people that think they are environmentalists, they can't accept that we have to stop eating animals. It's one of the biggest things that we can do and have to do.
Yes, and it's been a real kind of revelation for me personally. Well, my dad used to work in the meat industry, so I was brought up. I mean, he was never particularly enthusiastic about it. I'm sure he would have much rather done something else. But I was brought up eating lots of meat, and it's great not to have to deal with it anyway. I mean, it's easier to clean your fridge if you're looking for another why should I do that? Listen, it's now 2037. I am going to, yes, Tim says environmentalists who eat meat equal hypocrites. Well, I'm sorry to say we're all hypocrites and humans are hypocrites, but yeah, I do think it's the unacceptable part of hypocrisy. My Mac is going to go to sleep. I'm not just making that up because I want my tea. So I'm going to go because I don't want to get shut out. Thank you so much, because there's been an amazing conversation in the sidebar as well, in the chat stuff. I don't know how. Will have some way of getting us any more questions and stuff like that, I'm sure. Dale, thank you so much. It's been such an honor to get to speak to you. And I just really, really love the book. So I hope that if people haven't read it, I know a lot of people here tonight have, but get it for your friends and family, send it to them. There's still a bit of lockdown to go. I mean, they could do wonders by just reading this book. You educate yourself and it's fun. You don't even know you're educating yourself. So congratulations again, and see you all next time. And thank you, Will, as well.
And thank you, Lucy. Thanks for joining us. It's been lovely to see you again and have this, just fun conversation. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
No, I really enjoyed it. All right. Bye, everybody.
And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Yeah, I'll jump on Facebook after this and answer the questions that I can.
All right. Thanks, guys.